Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am super excited to be here with my guest today, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited. We're here to talk about your book, but also just like surviving heartbreak and being able to be present in negative feelings.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
so tell me a little bit about you and what you do and how you came to be here.
Well, my name is Elizabeth Bowman, and I am the author of the Sitting in the Sadness series. It's a collection of three books that basically record my stages of grief through heartache. They're written through poetry, and the first book is Sitting in the Sadness, which I think we're here to talk about today. The second book, which will be published in the next 2 months, is called Standing in the Sunrise. And then the third and final to the collection, which I am in the process of writing now, is called Soaring in the Stars.
Ooh, I love it. All of the imagery is really great and powerful.
Thank you.
So I guess obviously, what prompted the writing was heartbreak. Tell me a little bit about like that experience, just as much as you're willing to share.
Absolutely. So, I'll be just completely transparent. So, I live in Atlanta. Dating in Atlanta is pretty rough. I'm 36, never been married, but always have been a hopeless romantic looking for love. And the inspiration basically came because I thought I finally found it. And lo and behold, I did not.
Yep, I
um,
know that feeling well.
yes, you and I, we talked about it before. We were going through our heartbreaks at the same time.
Yes, yep,
The
yep. Yeah, what
fall
when
was not
was
mine was
this fun?
August.
Mine was September.
Yes. Fall was not our season. That's
No,
okay.
it was I had a nervous breakdown. It was great.
Yeah, that was like the whole inspiration for writing because when that heartbreak came to me, it felt different than anything else I'd been through.
Yeah.
And, not being married, I had an active dating life and I had a series of long-term relationships. But something felt different. And I realized I was really going through the stages of grieving, and I hadn't before. And a little bit about the stages of grieving because I realized with people reaching out to me about the book, there's so many people who really aren't familiar with the stages of
Oh,
grieving.
yeah.
I don't know if it's generational. I don't know if it's just gotten lost in translation with just the times, but I've had people of all ages reach out, and people predominantly in, I guess, our parents' generation,
Okay.
they can name the five stages of grief.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and to piggyback on that, in 1969, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she is the one who came up with these stages for us to grieve. They've been adapted over the years. They added two more. Then there was the seven stages, and then most recently they have the 12 stages. And I can tell you, I went through all 12. And healing is not linear, and I
No.
revisited lots of those stages. But in writing this book, I realized that I guess people our generation, they're familiar with it. Some can name a few,
Mhm.
but it's still, to some people a foreign concept. But I've had a lot of younger people reach out to me, and they have not even heard of this.
Wow.
And yeah, and it was like
It's like
super
psychology, like 101.
yeah, it was absolutely devastating though because
Huh.
I felt that a lot of that has to go with, social media and this positive toxicity and not allowing the grieving process. So that really inspired the book. When I was searching for something to cope with, I was lost. I'd go on my phone, I'd look at Instagram, and it was just these trite inspirational quotes that meant nothing to me. And basically, to, just avoid the sadness that you feel and throw on some lipstick and hashtag boy bye, and you're better than that. And it was
Thank you
really,
next.
yes, the thank you next. And it was not helpful. It was like a wet band-aid on my skin. Oh, I can tell myself this, but I'm not acknowledging what happened, and I'm drowning in my own emotions. So I decided to not take any of the terrible advice of just moving on quickly. And it came to the point where I was frustrated. I was being told, he's this horrible person that did this horrible thing to you, and you should just not be upset. You should just move on. And I said, oh my goodness, I just want to sit in my sadness. Just let me sit in my sadness. And that is how it all began.
Ah, the
I,
flicker.
yeah, I really wanted to just sit there and let me be sad. In fact, I was almost enlightened to be sad because I had become almost apathetic to love. I never really felt these emotions before. Um, so feeling them at 36 and really just like looking back on my history of love, I was confused, hurt, sad, and in a weird way happy that I could feel this sadness. And I
Yes.
wanted
Hmm.
to like have this journey with the sadness. And so I decided when writing that I would do it in real time. I wanted it to be as authentic as possible. It's basically my diary, which is real hard for me. I tend to be private about these
Very
things.
vulnerable. Yeah.
Yes, and I I did worry slightly about, oh, I'm going to be embarrassed or people are going to know that I failed in love, and I just kind of got over it at some point. Um and I thought too that it was not fair to put a happy ending to the first book because that is not how grief works. And I wanted the people who did not know the stages of grief to know it is okay to have an entire book that is sad
Oh
because
yeah.
not every ending is a happy ending. And I actually got a lot of kickback on that. People were like, oh, are you worried about ending it on such a sad note? And I said, no, because I want to be sad, and there are people who want to be sad too, and they feel like they're not allowed because social media says, show the best version of yourself, and that is so great, but it is not reality.
Yeah.
So I wanted to show that you could have an entire book of sadness, and that is okay. It does not have to
Absolutely.
end in this strong, girl power movement. I want to get there eventually, but right now I'm sad. And then, I just completed the second book, which mostly involves the stages of anger, which
Hmm.
Sitting in the Sadness did too, but it was a different anger. It was
Oh yeah.
denial anger, bargaining anger. Um, Standing in the Sunrise is more of that. Oh, okay. Well, I took off the rose colored glasses.
You're an asshole.
Yeah, I'm looking at what happened and now I'm mad. And then it helped
Yeah.
me get to the point of starting the acceptance route, which is the most, important stage of grief is getting to that acceptance. But there's no way that I could have done it in one book. It would have been insincere, it would have been trite. So I wanted to show people that you can take a whole book to be sad, no matter what anyone says. And I don't know, you tell me with your breakup, I just got so much advice of like, oh, you have to move on. And, I don't know how old you are, but like everyone was acting like I was an atomic bomb. My ticker was going to go any moment. And it was just like, you have to be fixed and it has to be now. And that just did not resonate with me. I needed to have my moment so I could fully heal eventually.
Yeah. No, it's funny. I mean, I actually just turned 32 last week.
Oh, happy birthday, girl.
Thank you. And my experience, I don't know if it's it depended on the friend, right? And I've gone through
Right.
some experiences with kind of dusting off my friendships too and figuring out like which ones um were there when I needed them or were there in the way that I needed them or whatever. Just as you do as you get older. But I was really lucky that I had like a family and a group of really close friends. I would get mad at myself for
Right.
not moving on. And I had this really close friend who every time that I texted her being like I just want to move on. She would be like, "Rach, like you got to feel it. You're not going to move on unless you feel it. You got to give
Absolutely.
yourself time." She was like, "It was 4 years. It was 4 years of your life. It was your entire future was wrapped up in it. Like you gotta just give yourself some grace here."
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. I mean, the stages of grief were traditionally for physically
Hmm.
losing a family member, and can transcend to heartache. And the people who did not understand that I needed to go through this process, I had to tell them, I was like, I'm mourning a death in a way, but I'm not mourning one person. And after I always explained this, it kind of like was the light bulb. I told them I'm mourning three people. I said, I'm mourning the stranger because every single person said, oh, well, he did these things. He wasn't the person you thought he was. It was fake. Move on. And I understand where they're coming from. So, but that was the stranger I was mourning. I was mourning
Yep.
the person who
You
was
thought you were
deceived.
with.
Yeah, who was deceived.
Hmm.
Well, I was mourning the deceitful person who I didn't
Oh,
know.
right.
That was a
Yeah.
stranger to
Hmm.
me. I was mourning that person who was not considerate of my feelings. I was mourning that person who was a liar. And that was a stranger. So here I am, and I'm mourning a stranger's death, right? But then what's hard for people is they want to transfer what happened to erase the things that did not. So he betrayed, he was deceitful, he was dishonest and inconsiderate, but that doesn't take away from the person that I loved.
Right.
He was intelligent, he was funny, he could have made me laugh forever. He had endearing hobbies and interests. I was always happy with him. I enjoyed his company. So then I mourned him. That was mourning the person I was with. So I have
Yep.
the stranger, the person I was with, but then the saddest mourning of all was I had to mourn myself.
Yep.
I realized that I was grieving the loss of me. And I loved that girl. I loved that woman who was empathetic, who was kind, who was sincere, who put others' needs before herself, who trusted. I mean, I absolutely trusted. If I respected your opinion and who you were, I trusted you.
Hmm.
And I realized I had to mourn the loss of that woman because this has changed who I am. And it's so sad to say that out loud. It's devastating, but it is the reality because if I'm going to learn from this experience, I it's almost like a resurrection. I have to start anew.
Yes.
So
Phoenix. Phoenix rising from the ashes.
absolutely,
Hmm.
yeah. And in my writing, fire is a huge thematic element for me,
Hmm.
and I had to mourn three lost souls, and that's why I needed this time. That's why I needed to just sit here and really become consumed with my emotions in order to start the healing process.
Yeah. No, I mean, you just said a lot of things that, yeah, like you have these like floating thoughts, but then, somebody says it and you're like, oh, that's what it is. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I mean, and I think that's the biggest thing is mourning who you were when you were with that person.
right.
People say like half of the relationship was you and you're mourning the person that you were, the future that you thought that you were going to have. Like that's almost bigger than the other person, you know?
Yeah, and it's bigger than the relationship in itself.
Mhm.
And I think that is what was so important for me to realize as well because I had mentioned I had become apathetic when it came to love. I never felt this deep of heartache from a breakup. And I might mention this was my shortest long-term relationship I've ever had.
Ah, okay.
So I realized too that was something I had to come to grips with was the acknowledgement that your feelings cannot be quantified. And I feel like as far as support, the people who love you, they want to fix you. If they know you a certain way and you are a sad version of yourself, they want everything possible for you to just come back. And a lot of that was, well, he wasn't your longest relationship.
Yeah, not
But
helpful.
I realized that I can't quantify my feelings. It was surprising and shocking to me as well. I mean, I couldn't believe it either because, we put so much um pressure on timelines and of people. And this situation really made me realize that it doesn't matter how long or how short or the amount of time. Feelings have no time.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, for me, it was a discovery of the capability to have those emotions, but also the shock of it being with someone who it wasn't my most long term relationship. It was my, I guess, my shortest long term relationship. But yeah, so it was trying to manage all these different feelings and emotions and not necessarily making it relatable, but just being truthful, because I feel like so many people have been looking for someone just to say, "Oh my God, that is so sad." And that is exactly how I feel.
Yep. Yeah, and it's funny that you use the word relatable because I marked different pieces in your book, and the ones that I marked specifically, I marked the ones that had themes of things that I have been thinking about. So
Yes, let's
like
hear it. Yes, I'd
I
love to hear
marked
it.
oh my gosh, let me grab it. I marked them as relatable. Perception, because I've been thinking a lot about different people's perceptions of things, that there are multiple sides to different stories, and the truth is usually somewhere in the middle.
In the
and
middle?
and I try
Yeah.
to, like, appreciate his perspective, and I try to honor mine. And another one was accountability. That's all you want, really, is for the person to take accountability for ripping your heart out.
Yeah, let me go to that. Like, I'm trying to get back in the sitting in the sadness mindset, because now that I'm on the third book, I'm trying to even, let's see, accountability. Thank goodness I have a
Oh,
index.
the glossary, yes.
Yes. Ah, you know what? It's so funny. I had another person, a stranger, reach out to me and mention this poem. And so a lot of my writings can be very, very short, and a lot of them are quite long. Like I said, it was just like a diary of poetic thoughts. But I guess I'll read it real quick.
Yeah, it's short.
Accountability. It was not something that just happened, it was something that you did. And I feel like, oh gosh, we're gonna have to like go into what actually happened for this to make sense. Um, I feel like, I don't know if it's the pressures once again of social media society. It has been very, very difficult for people to be held accountable for their actions.
Yes.
Um, as so my day-to-day life, I spent nearly a decade as a speech pathologist, so I am a communication therapist. And when you look at defensive communication, so when you are in a situation where you are supposed to be held accountable and you cannot verse that, the qualities that usually happen of someone with poor communication skills in a defensive situation are deflection, projection, and victim blaming, to shift the blame to not have to admit accountability for said action. And
I feel like my head's gonna fall off from nodding.
right, right. And it's sad because I I mean, I'm Catholic. I was born with Catholic guilt. My family's Italian. I feel guilty for basically breathing, for taking oxygen. And if I am made aware that I have hurt someone,
Yes.
not only am I immediately repentive, I want to know how, I want to know why. I want to ask, how can I rectify this situation? And how can I make sure that I never let this happen again, not only
Yep.
to you, but to others?
Yep.
And it was hard for me to have someone that I thought was right there with me, who was seemingly very considerate and thoughtful and honest. Um, I guess the listeners can't see my face, but it is what it is.
A little eye roll.
Seemingly, seemingly honest. Um, not be able to, when push comes to shove, just say the words, "I am sorry," or say, "That was wrong of me." And it was so devastatingly disappointing. And it was very, very, very hurtful. Not to give anyone the wrong idea, but if I would have just heard, "I'm sorry," the book may have not happened. And um, being left with not being accountable for your actions can be cruel in some cases.
I had therapy earlier today, and I literally told my therapist, I think I would feel so much better if I just got a little accountability.
Absolutely. You know, I think one of the greatest lessons from this entire journey, The best advice I could even give anyone had to do with accountability. I think we are robbed by being told to move on from a situation, you must forgive that person. Um, okay, I can see the backing of that, but I had so many people say to me, I'm having so much difficulty forgiving them. So I guess that means I'm not over it. I guess that means I'll never get over it. And I completely challenge that statement. I learned I did not want to forgive him because I was lacking accountability and I was lacking an apology. Like I said, I never heard the words "I'm sorry," and
Mhm.
I still don't know what I am supposed to be forgiving, and we can, you know, dive into that. I still don't know what happened as far as the betrayal, which is cruel. Okay, because I'm left to decide my own narrative from the evidence that was given to
Right.
me. And I said, well, you know what? I don't want to forgive him, at least not now. So what do I do with this? And I realized that the person I really needed to forgive was myself. Um, while I was, not to be cheeky, but sitting in my sadness, I realized the only person who truly, truly needed to be forgiven was me. I needed to forgive myself for my ideology of not being good enough for him. I needed to forgive myself for not being worthy of his love, for not being worthy of faithfulness, um, to not be the woman that he envisioned.
Mhm.
I needed to forgive myself for those things because if I couldn't acknowledge what I needed to forgive, there was never going to be healing. And so, yes, it is very important in the healing process to forgive, but I think that we need to re examine what or whom are we forgiving? You know, um, I think that people reserve the right to decide if someone is worthy of their forgiveness or not. And I decided that I was worthy of my own forgiveness.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, the accountability has everything to do with it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think it's like just something that you have to learn over and
Do you
over
think that
again.
you forgave your ex?
Um, Great
Flip the script
question.
on you, right?
Yeah, it is a complicated situation that has
Well,
to do
what
with,
when you read Standing in the Sunrise, we'll talk about it then.
Yeah, yeah, no. I think that in many ways I do.
And that
Um,
and you know what? I wish I could hug you for that. And I wish that you could give me a little bit of that forgiveness strength because I've pretty much decided at this moment that is not on the table for me.
well, in other ways
Now,
I don't, you never
yeah,
know
you
too.
never know, right? I
It
can
just really
guarantee
depends.
though, you will carry this relationship with you and that doesn't mean you have baggage or it's bad, but it does stay with you.
It changes you.
Yeah,
You're
it really
altered.
does. Yes.
Mhm.
And that is okay. And that was like the whole message with this entire series is I think it's almost stranger to not have scars than to walk away unfazed. Um,
Well, if they walk away unfazed, they're not really
but
unfazed.
unfortunately, I'm telling you, when I was like sitting there trying to cope with this and trying to understand my feelings and, the really less than valuable avenues of, Instagram
Oh, yes.
and Facebook, these motivational quotes are so great. Like, I think that some of them have, little pearls of wisdom in them, but they just completely mask telling people, giving them that permission to be sad. And I think if we understand really what it feels like to be sad, the next time we are in pure bliss or happiness, now we have something comparative. We can say, oh my gosh, I am so appreciative of this. I know the difference because I sat in that sadness. I know how that felt, and this is not it.
Yeah, and it's do you know the Velveteen Rabbit?
Yes, 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 yes.
That quote about like what is real. Every time I go through, something heart-wrenching that reminds me that even sadness, even that, it means that you're alive and that you're human. And there's
Yeah,
something beautiful in that.
it's so beautiful. And I try to tell people because at the stage I'm at now, I mean, when I was writing this, I'm telling you right now, there was nothing beautiful about the sadness. It was real ugly crying. It was really, really, really depressing. But I look now and I think it is the most beautiful I have ever been because I truly allowed myself to feel all of that. And I kind of feel like there's nothing that I could experience that would stop me now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I
And
love that.
there's there's something refreshing too about being able to show people that you failed. Um, this was a failed relationship. I know that for some people in my life, I'm from the South. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. Most of my friends were married in their 20s. Um, I think they were almost worried for me in a way of the appearances, embarrassment factor of, well, are you okay with letting people know that? And I've never had any ego invested in my life. There is no ego vested in here. But if I could make somebody feel like they are not alone, because I felt
Mm-hmm.
so alone, I felt like I was on this unique island all by myself. And the many people that I have met who were strangers, who now I try to like personally make each person who's reached out to me my new heartbreak friend. Um, it made me feel better. And we are not unique. You and I in our breakups, we would like to think we are the only one going through it. We are not. And
Oh, no. Yeah.
it is the best thing to not be special in this case. Um,
Yeah,
but it is also comforting to know there's someone who feels so sad and is okay with sharing that. And maybe it will give them a little push to share that with the people in their group or their circle of friends.
definitely. And I guess I'm thinking too about one of your pieces is called social distancing. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering what you think about how the pandemic has played into, relationships kind of breaking apart.
Well, that's so funny that you say that because I wrote that in the sense of when we were first started dating, there was still the social distancing.
Mm-hmm.
In the heart of the pandemic, though, I had already been single. This was, before this relationship. Um, I had a lot of people mention that, and actually, people who are going through a divorce right now, a lot of them told me that theirs started around the pandemic. And we're gonna have to dive into the social media because a lot of them have said the famous line of social media ruined my relationship. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of it was pandemic induced. People were on their devices more. There was more idle time. Um, and it was, I guess, temptation central of boredom for a lot of people. But I had people saying to me, social media ruined my relationship. And social media is, we should like go into my breakup. Social media is how I found out about the indiscretions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I found it out blindly because I, always trusted people unless they gave me a reason I wasn't going to walk around being jealous or, distrustful. He told himself out. He accidentally showed me his cheating on me when he was trying to show me a picture. And
Wow, slick.
yeah, no, oh gosh. And it was at a couple's brunch with my friends that absolutely adored him. Um and I remember seeing it and it felt like I was in a movie. Uh and I said, "Are you meaning to show me this?" And he looked at his phone and it was like he got out of the screen and I was like, who's that you're who is that you're talking to on Instagram?" And he tried to lie. And it's funny. I try to look back to see if there were any red flags. Honestly, I really can't. I wish I could sit here and just like completely be petty and say all that. He was lying behind my back the whole time, but there was never a bold face lie to my face until that day.
Yeah.
He gave it away with his nonverbal cues. I mean, the look on his face. He went from a 42-year-old to like a 6-year-old who just got in trouble. Try to lie, blame. Oh, that's text from my coworker. And I said, no, 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 that was not. Who is that? Blonde girl that you're talking to on Instagram. And for everyone listening, I am not blonde. um, and again, he lied with the same lie. And I'm not very reactionary. I usually can keep my cool. And I just looked at him and I said, please don't gaslight me. Please don't try to make me think I saw something I didn't.
Yep.
I said, you know, in your heart, I would never do this to you. Just imagine if the situation was reversed. And he caved. He caved. It was very
That's
panic.
something, I guess.
Well, I mean, let's not get crazy. He served me a lot of large bowls of word salads that day.
Yeah.
Um, but he panicked, and I wasn't gonna do this in public. So I said, we're leaving. We're gonna go home.
Go chat this
And
out.
yeah, and when we got home, it's poetic in its own way. I think I have a piece in it. It was the first and last time he ever saw me cry. I had never cried in front of him. There was no reason to. I was blissfully happy. I was completely satisfied in the relationship. There was no tears that ever were shed with him. And it was a floodgate. And he panicked and he, you know, tried to say that I don't know. I'm not going to listen. I'm not going to go into that. But the breakup. What is important about this is that when he was asked to be held accountable for what he was doing on social media, I was not told any extent of anything. I was not told how many people it was. I was not told if he was dating people behind my back. He had a job in which he traveled, and I knew of like shady business with his other coworkers, and it kind of made me a little bit nervous, but I just was like, listen, I trust you. Don't prove me wrong. And so when that came out with the social media, it was just actually like a snowball effect after that. But I never got told what happened, the amount of betrayal, how many people, what he was doing behind my back. Obviously, anyone listening, if you have something like this happen, immediately go get an STD test and
Mm-hmm.
take care of yourself first. I make sure I talk about that with everyone that I've been with because as much as you want to believe this person, you have to take care of your health. So that's my
Yep.
little like PSA.
Yep.
Um,
The only
but
person you can trust at the end of the day is you.
girl, I don't know about you, but when I got my breakup speech, it was basically I was very much hoping for the trophy prize of "It's me, not you."
Mm-hmm.
I got a real big panic word salad of how if if this is someone who was like unbelievably kind and thoughtful throughout this entire relationship, I got a lot of well, well, if you were the one for me, I wouldn't have done this, right? Right? Like I wouldn't have been doing this if you were the one, right? Right? And
Oh
I
no.
yes, and I said, I don't know what you've done. So like, first of all, sir, I cannot answer this question. And I thought, okay, well, this sounds panicked. Let's just like move on. Um, it got worse. I would have gladly taken the "It's me, not you" speech. Um, and this is the most embarrassing part. And I feel like it's so important for me to share this because I know that other people have had this said to them. I basically got shredded in the most demeaning, embarrassing way possible. I was basically told that he would not have strayed if uh, he saw me intimately worthy. That apparently that whatever is going on in social media was a better intimacy fix than me, and that I was the only woman that he has ever not been able to intimately connect with.
What?
Yeah, and now I mean I'm like in the acceptance stage of my grieving process, and it was completely a deflection and cop out, but it that has carried with me so hard because he didn't just say it once. He said that basically I was the only woman he never felt the want or need to be intimate with, which then why were you consistently? Women don't put up with that. Men either don't put up with that.
Mm-mm.
Um, Second, that uh, he could not see being intimate with me forever, which was bizarre. And I always kept a very open line of communication with intimacy. As a communication therapist, I loved intimacy. I think it
Mhm.
is fun. I think that is the best part of a relationship. You get to know someone on a deeper level. Um, no one's a mind reader. It's where you get to talk with that person, grow with that person, negotiate with that person. You really, really can grow close. I mean, obviously, physically with someone, and there were never any complaints. I was, unbeknownst to me. And he said about 3 times that you're the only woman I've ever had this intimacy problem with. At that point, I thought he was going to give me a shovel so I could, like, dig a hole in his backyard and just lie in there. Um, but it was so hurtful. I've never in my life thought that that was going to be the issue. And it had me thinking about every ex boyfriend I ever had. Were they just trying to save my feelings? Oh my God, am I bad in bed? And at 36, I thought I had figured all that out during, your awkward early 20s. And it's so embarrassing and it's so raw. And, I took it really personally. I've
Yeah, I
always
bet.
considered myself such a confident person. I had my insecurities, obviously, we all do, but, you know, it made me question my worth as a woman. It made me question my worth, as far as my identity in a relationship when it comes to that. And I realized I wasn't the only one. Once again, I was so excited to find out that this unique special island I thought I was vacationing on during my breakup. So many people do that when it comes to the deflection, when it comes to infidelity, when it comes to deception and betrayal. And as a communication therapist, duh, I should know that. You're deflecting, you are rationalizing. You don't want to have to admit that your moral compass that you held so highly in your regard, you broke it.
Right, right.
He was cheated on in his previous relationship, and I when he told me that, he shared that with me, I said I will never do that to him. I knew how it felt before. I was never going to do that to him, and I think it hurts so much to have to admit he did that, especially through a medium like social media, which he regularly thought was vapid and dumb and said his piece. And then he was like talking to the women that apparently, he thought were, you know, vapid and whatever, But I carry that with me now, and it's okay. And I tell people too. I've this area is, oddly enough, I've had a lot of men reach out to me about where they felt completely inadequate,
Mm.
and I tell them that it goes both ways, and I understand it's hard to believe because I regarded his opinion so highly, and you can't just like put a flip a switch. If you respected someone's opinion, what the only opinion I'm going to not respect is the one that has to do with me, that is making me look bad. It's hard. But I thought that was the most important thing out of all of this as well. With betrayal comes, the natural succession of questioning why they betrayed in intimacy. So, stay tuned. I don't feel that way anymore, but I still don't look forward to it as much.
Yeah.
With dating escapades, intimacy is not something I look forward to as opposed to when I did, and it's really sad. I think I would still hold it in a higher regard if this did not happen, but
Yeah.
that's something that I'm working out on my own.
Yeah. No, that's really difficult, especially like that's such a big connecting point.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, listen, no ego vested, but it's embarrassing to have to carry that weight with me that, when people want to talk about my breakup, I tend to leave that part out.
Yeah.
Um, but it's the truth. And I think that people really need to understand, even if you're in a situation, man, if you did something wrong, if that is really the reason, talk about it with that person, try to make it work. Um, Especially if you have someone who's open and willing to
Yep.
communicate. I think that if people were willing to take the chance to embarrass themselves a little bit more, then all of these situations could be avoided. Really, honestly and truly. But don't don't make somebody carry that with them.
Yeah.
It's really, really damaging.
And it's tough too, it sounds like you're like me when you're just somebody who if somebody tells you that you hurt them in some way. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Please tell me what I did, how I can, make it up to you, how we can avoid this in the future, right? Like, and there's this like quote that I found, I don't even know where on social media years ago, which was stop expecting you from people.
Oh, oh my gosh. Yes, yes.
And that's like really stuck with me because I'm like, just because I am like that doesn't mean that other people are willing to, because some people just like don't think that they're wrong. And even if you tell them, I'm not saying you're wrong, this is my perception, they don't give a fuck